Hi all, Randy Green here, and welcome to another podcast where we are discussing the implications of being a whole change maker. In this podcast, I want to discuss and explore the greatest question of all. But first, we have to remind ourselves that the whole project is all about how to assist and upgrade humanity into being able to doing the transition of our solar system. And first we thought it was going to go into the density 2, which our energy system is, but our physical plane of existence is going into the transition process of becoming a density 1 reality field. And that's the planetary activation cycle. So we are technically having two different types of transitionings. We are having the energy system that is connected to our template that should be able to go into density 2, from where it should be able to do the elevation process using the 2025 timeline, which is connecting us and can connect us to what we call the original fifth cycle density 2 type of energies of our system. And it's a very, very slim window. So it needs to be put in there so we can kind of say, well, this is what we can do to try and achieve it. But we also know we are in a solar system and a universal sector that is working against that on all levels. So in this video, because the progression work is all about how we transform into the transformative energy system and how we get that one up and running so that when we're ready to leave the physical plane of existence, or later on, as we will know, density 1, however it's going to play out, because this is still very, very uncertain. But those of us who are ready to leave the physical form at some point, we are, via the progression work, building our density 2 transformative energy system that belong to the original solar system and the restoration program that were initiated after the timeline event. And all of that is explained in the whole transition science classes, as well as in the template science courses. So that is there. So here we're going to focus on, as change makers, we're going to focus on, okay, we are having the planetary activation cycle where we're talking about, okay, our reality field is changing if the factions, the alien factions that are here, will allow for that. Otherwise, we'll be stuck inside the artificial program, what we call our world, and perceive reality from what we would see or call the base program, normal human perception. Of course, those of us who have the alternate reality perception and our psychic energetic abilities activated and ready, because we are constantly working with rebuilding and reconfiguring our transformative energy system, which bridges between density 1 and density 2. So let's just not label it too hard on one specific level, but we could say the part of the transformative energy system and the original version of it, the vibrational field and biofield, are technically density 1 oriented and are built upon Pleiadian technologies, whereas the mind field or the brain field going to the radiation field is based upon density 2 sciences, which came from the Sirius workstation. So we are having this, the transformative energy system can work on both levels. And we can use that in our change maker processes, because that's part of the patterns of change, the understanding of how to work with energy, as we're kind of saying, okay, when we work with holographic radiation units, we are talking the Sirian technology that goes into the fifth cycle and are working on the code streams of the original LPF1 network that were connected to the at time LPF2 network of the Sirian workstations. And again, I'm here talking about the way it used to be before the timeline event and after the timeline event. You kind of say what was natural gateways became gateways with holes and pockets and all sorts of stuff that shouldn't be there to begin with. So in this work, we can also say when we talk about the density 1 reality field shift, and that's why when looking into when I just want to throw something in there without explaining it further. But in 2017, I was working with quite a lot of military projects that were under the umbrella of NOAA, the New Order of the Ages, which were an American military covert or clandestine breakaway civilization attempt to create that type of humans that would be able to exist and continue to exist within Density 1 energies. Hence the name NOAA, and playing on that one, that the New Order of the Ages were not the New World Order. That's something else. That's the negative version of it, but the New Order of the Ages under the Aryan Shivas and the original root races, and working with the Aryan Shivas, working with the Syrians, and some of these conglomerates of different groups of aliens that were trying to create a new version of the human project, working with the old world order technologies and the old world order configurations, and trying to adapt them by inserting new forms of Pleiadian genetics. And the reason for that was exactly as I said here, with the vibrational field, the heart field, and the biofield that are connected, are interconnected. We know that because the two lower fields of the emotional field and the biofield within the DNA and the psyche and the enclosure, aka the base program, are centered around what we could call the older version of Pleiadian genetics, but have been highly distorted and destroyed to a large degree by the different types of distortions and the hijacker reversal of the original programs. And again, what I wanted to put in here with the emotional field and the biofield is that we know this as the psychosomatic connection, as in when people are thinking specific cognitive schemes, as in being highly depressed, they can affect their whole electrochemical processes of the body. The what we call epigenetic stress is also a huge factor in that one. And that goes in and affect our biology and the human DNA, and can create different types of RNA modification that leads to different forms of illnesses and mutations. So it is a scientific fact, which is interesting because when I began working with this 30 years ago or something, it was not a scientific fact. That back then, that was alternative when we talked about, how you kind of work with your emotions and how you process information and how you deal with reality and how you perceive yourself and others, and how well and sound you are psychologically will also determine how well a good health you actually have. The worse you are, the more negative you are, the more depressed you are, the more issues you have psychologically speaking, the more likely it is to develop diseases later on, because that it has a huge implication on the human DNA. And that was completely, wow, that was far out, that was fringe. And now it's just general science, because now we know epigenetics and, these things are interconnected, right? Including how we eat. So how we eat and how we feel and how we think, of course, affects our physical form. And that is the sciences that goes into the higher order energy system, where we understand that that's energy that we work with. The density energies, of course, are holographic units that codes are being coded by the way we process information systems. And that, of course, ripples into our three lower fields. And that what's going on there then ripples into our biology. And that then connects to what we call the more deeper levels of our original connection points to the racial grids, which is what will be activated in the planetary activation cycles. But more on that one, because technically these sciences, if I ever am going to make them, because people are kind of, it's like sharing the sciences of the quantum field. Who cares really? It's interesting for the ones that are working with it or use it to create machines or technology. But for the rest of us, it's kind of, we know it's there, but do we really need to know all the gory details of the sciences of that? So that is just open question. But later on in the planetary activation cycle, perhaps at the end of it, and when we know what we know, and when we're heading into what we call the human activation cycle in 2034, then we will have this more broader aspect and perception and perhaps context where these sciences will mean something for us. And same as when we talked about the stellar activation cycle. Most of the sciences that came there, for most people, is just kind of, wow, that's very interesting, but what does it really apply to me, to us, whatever? Because at that point, when they began in the early 2000s to come into the collective consciousness field, we didn't have much alien contact. That was only a few. And now we are suddenly having a broad spectrum of humans that are in contact via the event program, although most of these quote unquote contacts and visions are holographic programs. So that's run by Cube technology. So that is kind of, people are now encountering aliens or having all of these weird inner visions and programs. Could also be because they're linked up to virtual reality, so to speak, artificial timelines in the parallel universal matrix. But are they able to kind of take, that information they got with the stellar activation cycle, or how can we implement the whole radiation vibration kind of ideas into who and what we are? So this is again where we say, we know the sciences of it, and science of it is good, but what does it mean when we talk implementation? And when we talk implementation and we talk about, okay, what are we to do here? Aside, there's more to the psychology. We'll talk more about that, but there's also so we also have the sciences and kind of, sciences are good to know. We kind of need to know them as in, okay, perhaps it doesn't matter much in our enclosure-based program, artificial created reality under the event program. But for those of us who are dealing with not just the Cube technology, but also some of the energetic parasites and whatever's going on there, the sciences are a kind of a booster to our energy system, so that, let me put it this way, it's difficult to explain in words, but let me put it this way. We are accustomed to, with linear thinking, that what we know is something we can use to argument from. We are discussing quantum sciences, or we are, if you ask me, sorry, I'm going here, but if you ask me if you have a quantum scientist and he's trying to build a quantum computer, he knows what he's doing and he knows the sciences of it, but does he really do what the sciences tell him? Or is he doing something because he, per intuition, or perhaps some deep insights, which is unexplainable, just know that matches there and that fits there and that needs to be done. So in context, when we create something inside this reality, I want to explore that a little bit later on, because that's very, very important to really get into that, because we are so accustomed to, things are just kind of there. We buy them and then they're there. But when we're change makers, we are also the inventors. And that's the process of making something come into life. How do we do that? How do we build that? We're here talking gadgets and technology, but the process in a way is the same. So when we talk about the higher order sciences and the transformative energy system and the sciences of the reality field we are part of, then it becomes part of our holographic vibrational radiation energy system. And the holographic units carry that science within them because it has been studied and implemented. And how do you implement it? By working with it, such as, good example, I don't know how many of you that are capable of taking down cubes yet. Probably not many of you, because you haven't activated your radiation field. I'm talking about this. The radiation field is part of the whole template science course, because that's where it fits. The radiation field connects to the template, whereas the vibrational field connects to the body. So you kind of have a division there as well. So it's in the template science courses. But when we talk about taking down the cubes, would I be able to take down the cube if I didn't know the sciences of reality, although I cannot explicitly describe it with the human words? No, I know how to take them down, because in my energy system, there are these sciences of reality, which I know they are in me. They are part of me. Let me put it that way. And, that is, again, some of the things that are undescribable. And if you wanted me to describe it, the only thing I can do it is by the use of symbols. So the higher order sciences use symbols. You see the aliens do that as well. They don't have language. They're telepathic. And they use symbols. They use symbols to run their machines. They use symbols to run their crafts. They have symbols within themselves. Sometimes they have it in the different types or levels of their energy system. It's logical. It's light language. We've been talking about that earlier in my material, and the other people are talking about that as well. And that light language is sounds, but it's not just sounds as what we are talking. Our language is so fatigued of energy. But when we talk about the true sounds, we're talking sounds of creation, literally having the ability to have a symbol, have that energy in you, use your energy system, and then then create that sound via the vibrational field, and then put in the radiation energies, and then you put something into that pattern of change you want to activate. And then that begins to manifest using the reality energies. And this is not magic. This is how it used to be before the timeline event. And sound is not someone saying or something. It's not something that comes out of the mouth. It is the silent sound. And that's kind of, what's that? It is the sound that is a vibration that has a tone, but the tone cannot be heard and the tone cannot be seen, but the tone is sensed, and the tone is there because the tone is part of the sound of creation, from where whatever is there will be vibrated into some form that will follow that symbol that holds the sciences of creation. And that's the best way I can put it. And I completely know what that is because I see it, I sense it. Oh, this is what it is. I know that that's the grid it needs to be inserted into. And that's how I do it. And that's how I vibrate the grid like a spider that is walking its own net, or its own web, and how that makes these little vibrations that no humans can hear, but the vibrations are definitely there, as well as flowers that can sense the wing vibrations of a fly. Again, we can't hear it because we are not so refined in our senses, but animals have all of that vibrational stuff going on there, including, this is an interesting thing with dogs, they are seeing smell in color. Smell gives them color information, frequency information, which is very, very interesting. Anyways, that's not where I wanted to go. But just to put things in context, so the whole point of getting back into density 1 has implications. It gives us a power that we haven't had for a very long time. It was taken away from us because of the fall of Atlantis, wrongful use of quote unquote magic, of power and energy during the times of Atlantis. So that was taken away from us. And it's also been taken away from us because that will empower us to manifest and literally take down this enclosure. So we don't have that ability. As long as the enclosure is up, we technically don't have that ability because we are confined in frequency energies that do not respond in the same way. Yes, they have vibrations. Yes, they have frequencies. Yes, there is sound and all of these kind of things, but it's not holographic sound. It's not radiation vibration holographic sound. It is frequency sound. And that goes with air pressure, and that we only hear it as sound because our ears are detecting it as a kind of sound. Similarly, as we are refined within a very small spectrum of light, and we're only seeing a very little portion of reality compared to the enormous amount of different spectra of energies that are actually there. But what I want to go into here, so again with this, when we talk about future sciences, are we talking sciences within this reality, biotech, blah, blah, blah. I want to throw up sciences, to put it that way. Not at all. I couldn't care less. Seriously, I mean that. That's not where I want to work. I don't want to work with biotech and whatever, what humans come up with. That's their choice. No, if I am going to work with sciences that are to be implemented into this reality, I'm going to talk about the original solar system sciences. I'm going to talk about the original technologies. And most of them are similar to what we call alien technology. That's what I want to work. I want to work with the alien sciences if I want to work with anything. Although that's kind of when we talk about some of the stupidities that humans are doing, right? They do that because the aliens are beginning to get ready to implement some of their sciences into human sciences. And that's, of course, not where I want to go. That's the transhuman agenda, right? So, of course, that's not where I want to go. But that leads again into another question. Is that even possible? And I can't say so, but we know we can't work with what is possible. Then we're not change makers or pioneers. We are working with what seems impossible. We are working with what seems to be utopia. We are working with something that seems to not have any function at all right now. And we do that because one of the original rules of creation is that, or engineering, if you like, is that you have the now and you have the past. And the now is defined by the past. So you must change the past to change the now. We know that that's part of the progression work. We must work on the timelines to release what we got stuck there so we can free our potentials into this physical form, and what cannot be used, we must erase or let go of. Once we have done that, we create the momentum, we create our own jurisdiction in our own energy system, preferably also in our house, which I talk about in the whole transition science classes as well. From there, we have our own sphere of energy. We begin to create our own influential sphere. There we can begin to implement our knowledge of the sciences we used to have in the workstations or in other systems, or here out in density 1, preferably out here in density 1, because it's not much point of working with the Syrian sciences or the Pleiadian sciences that work in their system, because sciences are interconnected to the reality field we are part of. So logically speaking, we must of course work with the density 1 sciences of the outer domain of our planetary make up the original reality field. Okay, so that's why I've been using that information a lot in the whole transition science class, almost repeating it again and again and again in different variations, because all sciences have many different angles to it, and this is another angle to the same understanding of the LPF1 network. That is the original holographic network of our reality field. So we must, when we talk about what is the first step that we can implement it into our influential sphere, and that means our own little energy bubble. What can we begin to implement into our transformative energy system so it becomes part of us? And by that, via principle 4, will begin to be reflected into our perception sphere, and from that could potentially affect our surroundings. So what would be the first step that we can work with? And that would, of course, be some of the Pleiadian sciences that goes with plants in different variations. And I know some of you are already experimenting, and later on, of course, I need to go deep into that and go into some of the real sciences of that, because many of you are already experimenting, but you are still using base program sciences to do so. And again, as long as we're confined by the base program and the event program, there is not really much you can technically really do. There has to be removed some of these prohibiting technologies to allow you to really affect and work with plants in the way that they're supposed to. And plants are supposed to transform energy. They were part of the Pleiadian project to undo the effects of the timeline event. So that's also an understanding. So if we are saying, well, we are producing plants for food, we are technically not producing plants the right way. And you also remember from some of my older material that food is technically plants for food, vegetables and so forth, and corn and crops and all sorts of wheat or whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. All of these things are later inventions under what we call the hijacker programming. So that's another problem we technically have, and that's why I pointed you in the direction of you need to do the advanced work with nutrition, and we need to transform our food before we put it into our body. We need to get rid of the technology and the code systems that are there, which means, again, another task for me at some point. Oh, I need to do some courses on nutrition. I need to work with food. I need to figure out how to work with that. So that's another change maker. All of these to-do lists that I have when we talk about these things, because I know the sciences of it. I know what it is, so I can explain it. And by me explaining it, it can become part of your sciences, because when I explain something, I have a lot of visuals to it. I have a lot of energy put into it, and I have a lot of imprints to share, because everything I see is a kind of symbol that goes with the original energies and the original purpose and function of it. And by that is part of our progression work. So when we work with our transformative energy system to transform energy, the first logical step, aside from our body, is the food and our surroundings. So that's the first place where we become the change makers. So I just want to put that one in there. The other, which of course is just opened up another level of information that will be unfolded at some point in some way, in some form, because you're seeing as it goes with, that's why I call it process products. I know what needs to be done, but there are so many pieces of that pattern to make it unfold all of its potentials that goes on so many levels, hence the Project Blue Flower and all of these levels of who and what we are as humans. And there are so many boxes we need to take off. So we kind of say, yeah, I got the base program in check, so I don't have to put energy there. I got it all running now automatically as a kind of what we call subconscious program that is just running there, but we have mastered it, so therefore we no longer pay attention to it. Similar like running a bike or learning to walk or anything else that's just become part of our autonomous or muscle memory. Let's just put it that way. Let's just call it muscle memory. There's another word, but I forgot it. Okay, so what we're dealing with here is that we're saying we have all of that can be done. So we have a lot of tools that all goes with our energy system. So the first step of becoming a change maker is to get your transformative energy system up and running. So you can change energy, first step, as well as the sciences, so that when you change energy, you will do it automatically in the right manner because the principles are under your skin. You don't even think about it. You know, yeah, that's that one, that's that one, that's that one. And I talk about that in the whole transition science class, and I repeat it again in the whole template science courses, where I then link it up to the radiation field and the template, whereas the principles before were with the vibrational field and the body. So the principles can be used both for higher and lower. And then there's the next great question. What type of better world? So there are so many implications in that. So that's not a straightforward answer either, because if we go with the base program conceptualization, we have if you ask any person on the street, what is a better world? Well, that would be world peace, free water for all, free education for all, free food for all, equanimity, equality, liberation. You know the standard ones that are almost in beauty contests, right? You stand up there and say, I want to change it to a better world for the animals. Whatever it is, these are also good and fine. It's good and fine. But there are plenty of people in the base program that are working on that. So I don't need to add anything there. It's good people, good-hearted people. They're doing whatever they need to do. That's part of their progression journey. Here we're working with something else. Because not to say that you're not allowed to do that. If you want to work with the animals, fine. But then at least, as I said many times before, become telepathic so at least can communicate with them and figure out what they see as better for them. Because it's not what we might think is better for the animals, not necessarily what the animals think is better for them. Especially not now when they are also awakening, and quite a lot of who has been by magic and as a punishment been put into a mammal form, which is an animal with not much freedom at all and relying on either nature or under hard circumstances or relying on their human, they are perhaps not so eager to live up to what we feel is better for them. So we don't really know until we have learned to communicate with our animals and figure out what's actually inside that animal. And there is, no, I'm not going to go down that path. There is a pattern that is unfolding, which, I mentioned before, so that should also, if I am going to talk more about animals, it should be in a whole course in itself where I literally explore the entire topic and then I deplete it completely. And then it's in course material. So if people want to work with animals, which are also part of the transformation of the energies into density 1 or into the underworld or to the parallel universal matrix, because they are also sentient beings. So they are a life form. So they will, of course, also be part of the transition as the rest of us. They're just doing it in a different way. So that is also part of it. It's all about transformation. So change makers, pun intended, are both the ones that change the world, but they're also the ones that transform energy. 2 steps. So what is a better world? So this is what we are to explore. And I know people that are just going into my website and looking into my material and just a better world. They'll just fall into the boxes of what they believe to be a better world. So what do I believe to be a better world? If I were to do the beauty contest, right, I would say all aliens off planet, humanity awaken completely to their full potentials, sciences that would assist humans to alter their DNA so they could resist and be part of the density 1 transition, get rid of all technologies that are upholding the enclosure, let us see our reality field as it actually is so we know what we're dealing with, because I'm that kind of girl that kind of says I'd rather want to know what the truth is, because is difficult for me to find solutions if I'm building it upon an illusion. So solutions must be on reality and what is truly there, and not the illusions or programs or something that is keeping us from the true version of our world. And from the perception logs I talked about, as a child, I had this continued dream where I was in my house, and back door and front door. Front door, I was waiting for a gift or a parcel. And when it finally rang the bell, I couldn't lift the blinders, which is interesting because we didn't have blinders in my childhood home. So where did that come from? I had not seen it. It was not something that was common back then when I was a kid. It came later on in the 70s and 80s. So that was interesting, right? And when I finally looked out through the blinders, I couldn't see completely, but I could see two men with black trousers and black shoes. And I got this ominous feeling, and I got completely freaked and scared, and they were hammering on the door and putting that one in. And then I ran out the back door, and what I ran out to while they were chasing me and I couldn't see clearly, I couldn't open my eyes, I was chased into a world where everything was devastated, as if everything had been bombed out. All buildings were scattered and destroyed and gray and dark as after an atom war. And I know we have had that on one of our timelines, because we have more timelines in this reality field where we have played out different scenarios of reality. And our enclosure is... I'm just going to drop that here because that's, again, something that I perhaps will or will not discuss further. But our enclosure is part of keeping a portion, I would say around 60% of the human population, in either enslavement programs or imprisonment programs. And then we have what we call the elite, or the top, that belongs to other reality programs. Even though they're part of this reality, they belong to a different type of network, which allows them to do different stuff, such as becoming ridiculously rich, right? So, and inventing sciences and technologies where how do you even come up with that? How do you even do that? Because they are relying on alien technology, and they're already implementing it to their level of reality. And that's a specific group of people. We call them the elite. We call them nobility. That's a different one of them. And then we have the bloodlines. So that's that one. And I'm not going to go there because that has been discussed so many times. That was part of the whole 80s and 90s and 2000s discussions of people that were working with that material. So it's already there. I don't need to add there more to that either. But just to put that in context, so that's part of what our reality is. So that's going back to, if you ask me, what would that be? Then that would be that all of us that are stuck in here in these physical forms that are enslavement bodies or imprisonment bodies, all depending on if it's a punishment or you got enslaved because you were captured as a casualty of war, or were brought here for reasons and purposes and sold off as slaves, because that has happened too. So the question is, what are we to do with that world here as change makers, being imprisoned and being not of our full free rights to do whatever we want to do? And that is a good question. How can we create a better world if we are in this prison system? So that's the first step. But there is something in me. I can't explain why. I don't know when, but it's just a matter of time before that begins to break down. And I would say probably during the planetary activation cycle. And I know there can be different triggers that will begin to break it down. Either the momentum or the energy of the underworld, or cycle 1, 2, and 3, where cycle 3 in our older levels of a reality field are part of the AI machine world's third cycle, and the cycle 2 is the underworld, or what we say some of the ramifications of the mammals after the timeline event, and cycle 1 is the one that was hit hardest after the timeline event. So if these first 3 cycles kind of gain momentum, and they are closest to the core of our planet. So you could say cycle 2, if you want to put it as a kind of location, well, it's not far-fetched to say that could possibly be the whole lava rings that are in our planet. Cycle 1 is close to the core, and the core is not molten lava, as they're saying, but that's what they think because they don't know better. They don't know the alien technology, right? But that's where you have the crystals, the plasma crystals, and that's also where you have what we see as empty space, but it's technically not empty space. That's where it goes into quantum fields, and from quantum fields into the fourth dimension. And to some of it is artificial fourth, some of it's artificial fifth that is connected to our core, and then it expands out as also on the outside. So we both have it in the core, but we also have it in the perimeter of our planetary system. As if you go up to the ionosphere, you have technically a fifth dimensional layer there as well. And you have further up also, or below that, you have a version of the fourth dimensional features that resonates with the Schumann resonance. So that is also part of driving the weather, which is why we're seeing chemtrailing, all sorts of stuff on that level. So there are connection points between inner and outer, as we have it as well. So everything is kind of similar built up. And our reality field after the timeline event was created to transform energy. Everything here is created to transform energy. So that's the first most important rule, to undo the effects of the timeline event. So if we're kind of saying, okay, so that will break down the potentiality for the breakdown because of first, second, and third cycle types of energies, which will then create the worst possible future ever. But that will break all of that down. And it will break down because humanity will then be completely swarmed and taken over by these underworld forces during the planetary activation cycles. So that's a potential. We're seeing it. It comes on and off. And I know the transhuman agenda, parallel universal matrix, etc., trying to counter it. Also, as we heard with the Arcturians and the fifth cycle crystalline technology in the sun, all these kind of things trying to preserve certain levels of our reality, which will be part of the 2025 timeline jump for those of us who can carry these fifth cycle energies. We're doing the jump there. And if we can do the jump, then we will, like the elite, exist on a reality network that is beyond and above the enclosure programs, and then it will just be the enclosure programs and the ones that are imprisoned that will fall into these dark cycles, and the rest of us will jump into what we call a version of density one, which again will be in artificial programs similarly to as the event. The event tried to capture all. It was a catch-all program, but I'm pretty sure that they're going to, and I know they are, not pretty sure, I know they are dividing humanity into different groups, all depending on our potentials and how we work and how we live and how we exist and how we are following the different uplifting processes and the different challenges they are presenting humanity with, which where most have failed again and again and again, and they are the ones that will be left inside the enclosure as it will be swallowed up by the third cycle, second cycle, and first cycle. And there they will then experience a very, very different type of reality, which I preferably should not really be part of. We already had that in the Dark Ages. So it has been here before. It's not the first time. Okay, so we also had that before the Little Ice Age, and that's also some things that happened in the fall of Atlantis. So you can exist in it, but that's going to be it's like the sun no longer exists. It's like everything will become dark, and there'll be this huge, humongous dark cloud as if wildfires is covering the sky and take away all the blue. You've seen these dystopian futures where that comes into play, or zombie worlds or what have you, where, what do you call it? Terminator or something. That's that kind of future we're talking about. So that's not really where we want to go, right? And then there are the other potentials where we have the parallel universal matrix and what they are trying to do, but they are still trying to catch up with some of these issues with the human form that are linked to the first, second, or third cycle, which we know because we're having different weird diseases that are rising up back into humanity, which belong to the second cycle. So where the organic forms were hit hard by the effect of the timeline, and it had happened in different stages. So we're kind of saying first cycle template level, second cycle the collective racial grids, third cycle realities. So that's how it also went after the timeline event as we succumbed one by one. And the fourth cycle is undergoing that same process to some degree, which is part of what we call a future when we talk about a better future for all. So we are having this, those of us who remember how the different cycles fell, I've talked to a couple of people in my sessions, and they are saying, I'm just kind of, this is a flashback. We've done this before. We've experienced this before. And now it's come to this system. Now we're doing it again. Fucking hell, we're doing it again, where everything's just falling apart around us. We thought we had it under check this time, but no, it's not. Now it's all falling apart. And that is in that scenario where we become change makers. And I know that's not what people want to hear. People want to be a change maker because you want to create a better future where the lion and the lamb are lying beside each other and humans are kissing each other and we live happily ever after with little laughing children and rainbows and beautiful blue skies and pure oceans and animals and humans are the best friends ever. And the little dog jumping around in all happiness. That's what people want to do when they talk about a better future, right? That's what we want because that's what we've been programmed to think is the perfect future. And you do have people that have the dog and the house and the car and the kids and the sun and the shining and the money and the whatever, and they're not particularly more happy. So of course it's a program that we need to go beyond. So the exploration of change makers into what is a better future, that's also part of some of the things I'm going to discuss here and there and put in because it's contextual. It depends on compared to what. A better future is compared to what. So if we're saying the first, second, third cycle take over a dystopia, Terminator future where everything's run by transhumanism and cyborgs and underworld creatures and weird perverted beings and humans that are eating each other or being high on drugs all the time or whatever it is, well, then kind of, yeah, well, a better future compared to that would just be like living on Mars in dome cities. That could be a better future where things are peaceful and we're just growing plants in the domes or what have you. Because when we go back to the original LPF1 network, that kind of world we are accustomed to now and that beautiful sunshine and all the things that are going on right now is going to change. Well, you can be on Mars and you can have the blue sky and the sun, so that will still remain, but the sun will grow in stronger and stronger as, let's just call it her because it is original construction wise as she burns more and more off and she becomes hotter and hotter. And that will make our little Holocene perfect spot, distance from the sun begin to fall apart. And that means we will and must create some sort of dome cities here and in a way undergo the same process as it happened on Mars. And Mars were in the fourth cycle when that happened. Maldak exploded in its fifth cycle, so we're not going to repeat that one, but some of us that have fifth cycle energies, we will encounter more and more of some of the flaws of the fifth cycle of the Syrians as well as some of the flaws of the Maldakians. So there will be kind of something to compare with, oh yeah, that was the worst case scenario. How can we then do it differently? And the goal is not to salvage, save this world or this type of humanity. The goal is to transform this planet back into its original configuration. The goal is to transform us back into our original configuration, whether it's in the fourth cycle configuration or the fifth cycle configuration. Doesn't really matter. That's the first step. So that's part of that process, or both. Fourth body or an emotional field and fifth mental field, right? So that's the first step that we are undergoing. So that's the process that we are in. That's the goal we have in front of us right now. Very first step, because with that understanding of what that actually is, then we can begin to determine how many have been able to do that transition. Step one. Step two, do we have enough momentum so that we can begin to transform the density 1 energies and repair our LPF1 network? Step three, what can we then do in that when we begin to do that, when we go back into density 1, which one of the original technologies can we then begin to work with? And can we activate these? And can we see them? Can we find them? These are also some of the good questions. And that's where you begin to say, well, Ryan, that's way too science fiction. That is way too utopian. That is way too far out. That's not even possible. But remember, as I said here, I remember 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when I was a kid, because I can remember so far back in the olden days, right? I remember how reality was. And I know what I knew back then were seen as completely impossible. Many of these things has happened today. So being a change maker is not about making the possible or choosing the easy path. It is about making the impossible possible. But it begins with us. It begins with what we are. It begins with our energy system. And that's where many of you have not been efficient enough. You have not been doing enough. And the struggle, I know that we're struggling. We're being derailed constantly all the time. But it is possible. It is possible, but it takes more than what most people think. And if you just talk about normal change makers on Coursera.org, there's actually a little course material on change makers where just normal people, so to speak, that are change makers, that are going in with the whole water issue or Africa or whatever. They are so amazed of how much it takes to change reality, where it's logically, of course, we should have that water supply and all of these kind of things. It's completely logical. But when we talk about in reality and when it's unfolding, as I mentioned before, then it becomes much, much more difficult. And I want to say right away, I didn't really listen into all of their explanations because it was just kind of, some of them had voices I couldn't stand listening to, and others of them were a little bit too high, whatever. So I just listened to the presenter, and he had made a book about what it means to be a change maker. And that just sparked the input that I'm here using, unfolding that, because I already work with implementation of technology. As you know, when I was 18, I already worked with it in my human resource management, my business administration, and the secret cultures of organizations, and how to change cultures or the cultures in organizations, and what is the best leadership, what is the best management, all these kind of things. So that's working with organizations is similar to working with little communities, because an organization is a little community. There are hidden rules and unspoken culture and all these kind of things, which are in a community as well, which is part of our world too. So businesses are technically the first step. If we really want to transform this reality, businesses are the first to begin to do that, because businesses are also the ones that has led us down that pollution trap that we are now in. So that's also another side of it. So I'm not just talking out of the blue here. I've got many, many different angles on it, including practical experiences, including the psychotherapeutic work, trying to make people change the way they feel, the way they think. Because what led me going from business and management and administration and human resource management into being a psychotherapist was because when I was in these organizations or working with that, I discovered, well, this is not possible unless we take the psychology into account, because people go to courses and then they come back. And why is it so difficult to implement really good ideas? Why is there so much resistance to it? So that's technically why I decided to become a psychotherapist, to explore that. What does it take to change humans? And then while I was working as a psychotherapist, I discovered that's not efficient either. Talk does not lead the whole way. Going deep down does not lead the whole way. Understanding our childhood traumas is only part of it. What is that needs next? And that's where I became a healer and worked as a healer and did my formal education as a healer. Got all the tools, got the license, and then began working as a psychotherapist / healer and working with people there. And there I saw how things began to change, because once I began working with people's body and working with their energy system and transforming their karma and working with their past beyond their present lives, then shit began to happen. So that's why I'm saying here, we need to go higher up. If we want to change this world, we need to go up and become acquainted and reintegrate our transformative energy system and ignite it into this physical form. That's the first, very most important step of becoming a change maker. But for now, we kind of worked a little bit with what future, and it goes into, of course, what type of world and all of these things, which are important questions to ponder upon. But right here, just seeding in another level of information, another piece of the puzzle, which is we're just working in the raw contour of the pattern that we are building here, but we're beginning to see, okay, becoming a change maker has many different levels. But one thing that unites all of these levels is the ability to work with energy and transform energy from its lowest possible energy rate to its highest possible purity rate. First step. And then follow the standards of the system that we are part of, so we work in alignment with the original function and purpose of our solar system. And step 3, we work with our consciousness and activate that level, hopefully, so that we can get to the highest progression rate. And once we do that, we get reconnected to the original knowledge that is built into the original consciousness units and the original holographic units of our transformative energy system. Then shit will really begin to happen, to put it that way. But the question is, will we be allowed to do so? But we're change makers. We work to make the impossible possible, and we know it's going to take time, and we'll work patiently, step by step, bit by bit, pieces of the pattern transform one step at a time until we begin to see some effective results, whether it's just within our own energy system, or it's beginning to understand the sciences, or is beginning to see the technologies. Doesn't really matter, whatever it is. It's just the moment we break through the base program perception level and begin to see what is also there, that is the first step where we can begin to really broaden that little bleed through and expand it and expand it and expand it, and hopefully get into a deeper perception of what is possible to actually do as a whole project changemaker. Thank you.